Hello, Joy Brooks with Email and Coffee. In 1826, a French lawyer said, "Tell me what you eat, and I will tell you what you are." Today, as more people reconnect with their bodies through food and activity, the impact reaches farther than our human health. We take for granted the planet's ability to nurture. The earth that sustains all living creatures has been gifted with a miraculous balance. Acabonic Farms on Long Island is one of many agricultural enterprises that serves the community through a foundation of past, present, and future best practices. Now, down at the farm, Stephen Skrenta. Hello, Joy Brooks with Email and Coffee. Today we're having a conversation about food, about ranching, about trends, about distribution. I've got Stephen Skrenta, who will tell us a little bit about himself, and we'll begin the conversation with you, Stephen.
Well, thanks, Troy. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's know who you are, what you're doing, and what's a little special about what you're doing.
So I own and run Acabonic Farms. Acabonic Farms is a ranch. All of our properties are located in Suffolk County, eastern Long Island, and we raise livestock. We've been doing it since 2015, and we sell what we raise direct to the consumer. So the vast majority of our revenue is our products that are sent directly to our customers' homes, very conveniently. We raise grass-fed beef, 100% grass-fed beef, grass-fed lamb, pastured pork, and pastured chicken on our farms. And our largest farm is in Middle Island, which is, for those who don't know, it's about 15 minutes west of Riverhead. And then we have some smaller farms around that area as well. So when we first started, there wasn't as much livestock. There still is not much livestock on Long Island on the farms that remain. But increasingly so, livestock is coming back, and that's a really good thing from a fertility perspective, and that's something that I'd be happy to talk more about, I guess, as we explore the topic further.
What made you think about ranching?
There's a big trend that's been going on now for the last several years in the U.S., which is increasingly so. Americans are focused on what they eat and where it comes from, and that wasn't always the case. It was certainly the case years and years ago prior to World War II, but as the industry consolidated and really marketing kicked into a high gear, we've become disconnected from what we eat and where it comes from as Americans, and that's caused some issues from an environmental perspective, from a animal health perspective, and also, of course, from a human health perspective. And so over the last few years, as people begin to reconnect with the correlation between what they're putting into their bodies and their overall health profile, they're seeking out more and more healthy food. And I thought that was very interesting, and I was always very interested in it. And I thought to be a participant in that activity would be exciting. And as I studied the topic, the most effective way to produce truly healthy food, nutrient-dense, healthy foods, is to focus on soil health. And if you focus on soil health and you do it right, you need to reintegrate livestock back onto family farms. They are a big part of providing the fertility that grows our healthy foods. And so that's where I started. And and I kind of just stayed there. We started with grass-fed and finished beef, and then we added lamb, and then a short while ago we added the pasture chicken and pork.
Mm-hmm. It is a trend to for a lot of companies now, uh, for lots of different foods, to get it directly from the producer. You know,
Hmm.
fish is becoming more and more, direct from the fishermen. People
Right.
becoming more aware that um, they're more aware of the farming industry
Hmm.
in a way that they want to engage with the farmer directly, because, as you said, that relationship is different than this huge corporation um, producing volumes of meat,
Hmm.
shipping it to local supermarkets, and then the person buying it there. Or, it might not even go to the supermarket. It may go to this company that prepares it, and then they ship it to the supermarket. So you're no longer the middleman. It's direct.
Right. Yeah. So two major things have happened. One is um, the technology, and the technology in particular around logistics. So if you think about our ability to get a package, from point A to point B over a long distance within 24 hours, that's improved, massively over the last decade or so. And I think that there are companies and perhaps there'll be differences of opinion on this, but companies like Amazon that really paved the way around a lot of that innovation and a lot of that drive, and their partners in the form of UPS and FedEx, and then perishable shipping, technologies, insulated liners that weren't styrofoam and things like that were acceptable. That was the first sort of that allowed this to happen. The second was sort of a destruction of trust, that consumers have gotten to the point where they're kind of fed up with being told something that maybe isn't as true as it should be. And so one way to regain the trust is for consumers to have access and to go direct to the source of, in this case, the individual, and then the individual's farm that's raising or growing their food. So when you combine those two, it's sort of lined up to be a really interesting time for farms that are open to changing their business models and cutting out the middlemen, as you say. I'd overlay one other point, which is COVID.
COVID
It's
always
sort of,
ends up being part of the conversation these
yeah,
days. Whatever you do, it sped so much up. If anything was going in any direction, it put velocity into it, or
mm,
it shut it down completely.
yeah. And I think in our case, if there were farms, or if there was at least an interest on the farm to explore going direct to consumer, it was a time where consumer behavior, which tends to take a fair amount of time to change, it was that agent of change that allowed that to happen very, very quickly, like literally within a matter of weeks or months.
Right.
So
It's the only way to get
if
food.
yeah, if you were nimble and had the ability, and were sufficiently open-minded to sort of give it a try. Thankfully for us, we were doing it before COVID, um, it that consumer behavior provided a big opportunity for a lot of different industries, and in particular, I think small family farms.
And also in today, where corporations are buying up farms left and right, not only in the U.S. but all over the world, in order to dominate, control, um, easily manage food on a huge level. Somebody will come to you. It'll be a Danish company will come to you and say, "We want to buy a farm because we want to ship food to China."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you're like, "Oh my goodness, it's either that or we're going to shut it down because so and so won't take our food anymore." You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, what's happened now is you're in a situation to say, "No, I'm sorry. We are changing our business model, but we're going direct to consumer."
Mm-hmm.
and it's it's creating a cottage industry where it used to be that way 100 years ago, where the
Mm-hmm.
local farmer supplied the the surroundings with food.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't
Yeah.
he wasn't necessarily selling it uh, to another state. He was supplying the cities around his farm.
Yeah. I think to some extent, yeah, I think to some extent that is an opportunity for small, local farms. I think, however, and everything you said, I think is fair. I would say even small local farms, though, are struggling to find ways to scale, right? Because the truth is that I may be a small local farm, but I still buy corrugated, boxes to ship my materials. And unless I'm, much larger, those boxes are almost prohibitively expensive to buy.
Mhm.
Um, I ship by UPS. And so unless I'm significantly larger, I don't get discounts from UPS. And so the economics of business, even for small local farms, work better most of the time at scale. And
Right.
so, we're a small local farm, but it's not in, our search or our drive for scale similar to that Danish company that you mentioned, exists. That's the truth. Because this is a low margin business, and so the pennies matter, and um, and you begin to reap the rewards of the hard work that you do, and provide cushion to stay in business, um, when you're making a little bit more money,
Right.
and that comes with scale, Dre.
Right. There comes a point where um, it's either this way or that way. And if
Yeah,
you
and
can't go that way, you've got to go this way.
yeah, and I'd say that that's not there's not some big like horrible company out there like UPS or cardboard company XYZ that's doing that, right? We're talking about what the driver of that is consumer behavior. So if you're on Long Island and you're going to King Cullen and you're going to Stop and Shop, and then that's a behavior or that's a purchase decision that you're making that will impact small local farms, right? If you are eating outside of seasonal norms, you are making a purchasing decision that's not entirely helping small local farms,
Right.
right? And so I think what would be more constructive for us, not that I'm not criticizing you, Joe, I'm just generally speaking, what would be more constructive is if we said it's not about Amazon or UPS or FedEx or cardboard company XYZ. It's about our own actions on a day-to-day basis. And we can make the change. Like, we can affect the change simply, if you were to say 7 days a week, cooking for the family, or 6 days a week because Friday's always pizza or whatever it may be. 6 days a week I'm cooking, and 1 or 2 of those days I'm going to source my proteins from a small local farm. That would change the game. Would change the game for small local farms. And that's what I would hope that everybody would say. Okay, I have the power to make a change. This is what I need to do, and that is 1 or 2 nights a week I'm going to source my veggies or my protein or whatever it may be from the local farm.
Mm-hmm. What I mean, what this is sort of a local bodega, right? That's but it's on the shipping model. So you would go to your local bodega and you would buy the corn that's in season, the beans that are in season, um, eggs that are, getting provided by the local, the local farmers. And then the meat that's already there, that's being provided by the local farmers. This bodega exists virtually out there. Now people,
Hmm.
instead of buying from their local supermarket, which sometimes is sourcing these local farms, not always, they say they are. They say they buy local. So instead of going to that supermarket, you have the option to purchase directly from the farmer. Now, I don't know about produce. That's difficult, right? That's difficult. But it's, I wouldn't say that it is or it isn't impossible. I would hope that somebody would be able to figure it out. Meat is easier, um, perhaps, because it's, you can freeze it. What are you going to do with spinach? It's you can't, you got to ship it, and it's only going to be within the period that it's picked. Right. So now
Yeah.
all the spinach is gone. We're not talking about spinach anymore. It's gone. It's now apple season. We got apples. You want apples? Um, in any case, so produce is different, but protein is somewhat easier easier to manage on a farm direct to consumer. I mean,
Maybe.
you
But
know,
see, so, I mean, there is a season to cattle, like one of the things that we've forgotten about, right? Because conventional models send cattle to feedlots, and it doesn't matter if it's the summer or the winter, they're going to stand, out there, and they're going to eat grain, and they're going to fatten up. But if you move to a grass model, there is the grass doesn't grow in the winter in New York, right? So that's 6 months right there. So that's half the year. So then spring, it's really difficult to fatten an animal on spring grass. It's just too much water. So that doesn't really help. So you then move into summer, and then you say, oh, summer's kind of tough too because it's super hot out, and you know, even an animal built for the heat, you're talking about once you get into the mid to upper 80s, that animal is not going to want to eat very much. It's just too hot. And so then you're looking at the fall, right? When the grass is ultra healthy, it's nutrient dense. The weather's, the nights are cool, the days are warm, animals gain weight. There's a seasonality to it. At the rate of gain that the animal is putting on in an average fall, you can get the marbling and you can get the finish, the fat quality on the carcass that people will enjoy. That's seasonal. But we just got through saying it's not entirely. This is absolutely is seasonal. We've just forgotten about it because our model in the U.S. is to send the animal to the feedlot. And we could talk about animals the same way we talk about veggies if we really wanted to. What we've learned is that that our the industrial food complex has figured out ways for those ups and downs from a seasonal perspective to be smoothed out. That's actually not such a bad thing from a consumer perspective because it's always going to be there in Stop and Shop. You're never going to have to worry about that. But when you move more to a model like ours, then there is seasonality, and that does factor into the complexity of raising proteins for your local community.
but it brings it back to a more natural level. It takes out the emergency of forcing animals to fatten within, 5 months, whatever, to get them to slaughter, to get them butchered, to get them out, to bring in new animals. I mean, there's nothing wrong with business. I mean, I get it. After the war, after World War II, they thought of ways to make sure there was food on the table. And in America, you could get food wherever, that was the objective. Make sure children didn't starve. They got their food, they got their protein, and they solved the problem. But they created another problem with that solution, and that problem is mass production has implications. It has implications on the soil. It has implications in the rivers. If you're fertilizing to make sure there's always grass, if you're using antibiotics, or if you're using steroids, or whatever you're doing to make sure that your herd makes it in time for what you've contracted, you're managing a business now, and it's the second reason you're here to feed. Let's put it this way: the first reason that you're here is to feed has become the second or third. The first reason is, let's get them to the slaughterhouse. That's what we need to do, because we've signed on the bottom line. They got to go. We're gonna, we're in a business. We've got to produce. The model direct to consumer. Obviously, there's an agreement there with the consumer, but it's not on a massive scale. So what happens when you run out of beef, run out of eggs? What happens? And you might.
I'd like to divorce the concept of sending food direct to the consumer, right? That's logistics. So I could send very, very low quality food to lots of consumers. But just because I'm sending it directly to the consumer doesn't mean it's good, period.
Okay.
Right? So the logistics around picking and packing and inventory and shipping logistics and all that, that's a completely different business. And anybody really could do that with, you could do it with candy, or you could do it with, the highest quality pastured chicken, right, ever raised. Doesn't matter what you're sending. So I think, if we could just set that aside and focus on sort of the trade-offs between volume and quality, right? Because in the U.S., we have, as well as many other countries that admire the U.S. and the way that we do things and work to replicate what we do, there's been a tremendous trade-off between higher volumes, and the consequence, as you mentioned, is oftentimes much lower quality, right? There's a trade-off there. And so, what we have is a need or desire from the consumer to refocus on quality, right? And I think years ago, when this concept of organic came out, that began to get people thinking about this. Well, why does it matter that a farmer does not use conventional pesticides? Or why does it matter? Why does it matter that a farmer uses non-GMO seeds? Why does it matter? So a consumer began to re-engage with the quality of their food and began to think about, well, if the quality is much higher, then I should be willing to pay more for it. Right? That's separate than direct to consumer and delivery logistics.
That's a whole.
And that's the trend I'm talking about, which is consumers saying, okay, I want something better and I'm willing to pay for it. Now, the problem that's happened over the years is big food companies didn't stand around and do nothing, right? They saw where that it's tough for big food companies to grow, right? Just generally, faster than the rate of growth of the economy. So they're kind of just growing along at the same rate that the economy is growing, and that's what they get. But then this little thing called organic comes along, and that's growing like a rocket. And they're saying, well, why don't we participate in that? Well, they can't, because the system that they've built in order to produce the food that they sell, or the source, doesn't work for them at their scale. So they start to put pressure on the rules around what is organic defined as. And at some point, right, they find a way to wiggle themselves in, right, that may not be as honest as what a consumer has in their mind, right? And then all of a sudden you have people paying a big premium for, say, organic, and it's basically very, very similar, if not the same as conventional.
Right.
And that's just a fancy way of saying stealing, right? That's saying you pay me a 30% premium and I'm going to basically give you the same product. And that's really disappointing for people, as it should be, because they're basically bargaining for something better.
And that's the
And
trust
then
we're talking about.
that's the trust they're talking about. So if that's going to continue to happen, at some point consumer is going to say, okay, wait a second, I get it, right? Sometimes people stretch the truth. Companies, hire lobbyists. Uh, our government agencies aren't as perfect as they should be, and blah blah. I'm going to take this into my own hands, and I'm going to go down to a small local farm and source my food from them. The problem is there aren't any small local farms around, right? Because there's been massive consolidation, and now they're all big factory farms. And so if you go to a big factory farm and knock on the door and say, I'd like to buy, some corn and some tomatoes, you're not going to get anything, right? Because they're like, well, that's not what we do here, right? We sell them to Kraft or Del Monte or whomever it is, right? And then, so now what you have is, people saying, okay, well, let's find those small local farms that do give us the ability to do a few things. One, see the farm, have a conversation with the farmer, ask questions, talk about where they get their fertility from, talk about what their protocols are, right? See it for myself. And then the difference now is, okay, well, I could do all that before, but now, because of some of this, technology and the logistics around being able to source and actually buy from that farm, whether it's direct on the farm or, a day later through a website, that now has become really powerful. And so we almost don't have an excuse now. It's that consumer behavior that I was talking about, which is I can go to King Kong, or I can go to Stop and Shop, or I could go and source my proteins from Acabonic Farms, right? You can do it. And so that's our hope, is that there'll be more and more of that, um, as this trend continues, right? And I think if it's important to you on Long Island, or or the suburbs outside of Boston or outside of Philadelphia, wherever it may be, to have small local farms in your community, it's in fact the listeners of this podcast, and only the listeners of this podcast, the consumer has the ability to make that happen.
Right.
Through purchasing decision. That's all.
That's right.
Now, if you talk about Stop and Shop, and if you talk about King Colin, I won't talk about Stop and Shop, but I will talk about King Colin, which is for those that are on Long Island, it's sort of a very Long Island supermarket brand.
Right. It's a family business.
Yeah, they're trying to figure out how to do it as well. Right? They have big banners when you walk in, source locally. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I probably called King Colin, and I'm not exaggerating, about 12 times. I can't even get them to call me back. So what a banner says, and then actually what they're doing, right, may be not dissimilar to what Kraft or Del Monte or some of the other big companies are doing, right? Because again, they have their own business and they have their own objectives, right? And it's not the same objectives as Acabonic Farms, a small local farm. And so aligning that customer behavior with the objectives of the actual source of the food, it may not be King Colin, it may not be Del Monte, it may be Acabonic Farms, is really important. And that goes to education. I'll stop there.
Mm. What is interesting is the fact that Long Island has always had farms out east. And those farms out east always sold our stuff on the side of the road. So it was always a thing for Long Islanders in the end of the summer, midsummer, end of the summer. Oh, let's go out east. We'll get some peaches and apples, and in the beginning of the season, strawberries. At the very end of the season, go to the farms and pick up the pumpkins. But it's always been that local thing, and there are those behaviors in lots of lots of places in the U.S. And it's that tradition that opens the door to this new concept of source it directly. Find a farm and source it directly. If it's already whether it's a consortium, and I don't know all the business that goes into it. If some ranchers get together and they say, okay, ranchers in Nebraska all get together and they say, we can't do it on our own because we're all too small, but let's do it together and let's call ourselves, I don't know, Nebraska beef, and we'll sell directly to consumer and we'll all work together. Those are other models that work. So, it depends on where you are, the product that you have, and the business model that we're not really creating. We're recreating, we're reinvigorating, and we're doing this because the consumer suddenly turned around and said, huh? I can get it direct.
It's starting to happen, yeah, and I think that there are some farms that now what I'm talking about is where people's buying pattern begins to shift back toward a routine purchase from a small local farm. One of the things that you see, and it's not just Long Island, but a lot of the farms, obviously were turned into housing complexes. Okay, we know all about that. We'll set that aside for a second. But, vineyards, for instance, that was a business model that a lot of the agricultural land has tried, and some, maybe very few, have been successful at. The business model of farm entertainment, however, right, is something different than, so when we're going to go out east and we're going to pick pumpkins and we're going to get a candy apple and we're going to do a hayride. That's something very, very different than what I'm talking about, right? It's not. I mean, it's very, very different. What I'm talking about is 1 or 2 nights a week, someone sourcing their protein from aquaponic farms, right, or their fruits and veggies from a small local farm. It's not, maybe once or twice a season do it, or I'm out in East Hampton and it's so beautiful and I'm just gonna, I'm gonna splurge, to get, some sweet corn and whatever else it may be. Right? I'm talking about that routine drive instead of Stop and Shop and King Cullen doing. That's what I believe will make a massive difference. So the scale of the interest and the consumer behavior, I'd tweak a little bit, in terms less about the occasional twice a year out to the eastern end of Long Island. It's really beginning to rely upon it, which I think would make a big difference.
Yeah, what the seeds are there. So as you said, the farm that seasonally does the Halloween shtick, they're doing that because they need, they at some point in time they said, let's supplement. How are we going to do that? Well, what about Halloween? Let's do pumpkins. Okay. So after the corn's done or whatever, we'll open up the lot. We'll bring the people into the corn lot. We'll put up hay, whatever it is. They came up with a solution because people wanted, they asked a question. The question was, is there anything out east for us to do? And the answer was yes. And they came up with all these different solutions. The question now is, I want to be more involved in the food that I'm getting. I want to have more of a decision on that food. I want to know more about the food. And I don't want to just conveniently buy it. Or I don't mind spending the extra money. We're eating less of it anyway. We don't need to eat a 15-pound steak. We can all have a smaller piece of steak, but it's healthier for us. So the 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 actual thought process of bigger, better is now better, they're more expensive, but it's not necessarily, it's not bigger, it's better. The requirements have shifted. During COVID, you were lucky to get toilet paper. You were lucky to get eggs. You went to the store. If you could go to the store, you were lucky to get whatever was in the store. The point is that now people are saying, okay, so we went through that. That was awful. I don't ever want to go through that again. And now the thought process, like I said, the thought process is it's not just convenient. It's not just convenient. It's not just easier. It's better. I'm not just going to the gym and quickly doing an exercise routine. Now I understand that it's what I eat, and if I'm not if I'm not eating the right food, if it's just I'm sloshing down some sort of a protein shake out of a bottle, powder bottle, is that really accomplishing what I want? They're really thinking about what they're accomplishing, what they want, what they're doing, and the thoughts that are coming up, the questions that are coming up, can be answered by a model of industry that already exists that is slowly shifting. So the farms exist.
Yeah. So maybe just two comments on that. So a few comments. One, I do believe it always has to be convenient, right? Because I don't think that convenience right now, from a consumer perspective, is going to be sacrificed. I don't think that's where we are. The second thing, and this may be a little controversial, is that not all small local farms are producing healthy foods.
Mm.
Like, why should we just assume that?
Right.
And so the difference a small local farm, I think, provides is an opportunity for a consumer to re-engage with that farm, to evaluate their practices, to see if that works for them relative to the premium that they're being asked to pay for that food.
Mm.
And then the last point I would make is, you mentioned something and you said it quickly, but with respect to expense, it may be a bit more expensive. I'd suggest that in the long run, it's probably going to be much more expensive to continue to source your food from farms that are producing low quality foods. And that could be conventional, or it could be a small local farm, right?
Mm-hmm.
That over time, if you're not putting into your body something that is healthy and clean and nutrient dense, that expense may be in environmental destruction. That actually has a cost, by the way. It may be in medical bills. It may be in a deterioration of mental health. It could be in a lot of different things. And so if you're saying, I would never buy a $12 and whatever it is, 25-cent pound of ground beef from Acabonic Farms when Costco is selling it for $3.25, that's absolutely fine, right? But that $3.25 may be costing you more over the next several years, and for the time that you're going to be around on this planet, than you really think. I don't think the true cost of that is $3.25. And so that's something that you should factor in. To My hope is that people are factoring into their purchase behavior.
I mean, it's happened for me. I think about the fish and the beef that I eat, and I mean, I stopped buying from the stores and I started to outsource different places, and I'm trying to find the place that I like the most. And which is glad I've found Acabonic, because that will be my next experiment. But I know that I'm paying more, but again, my thought is that I don't need to eat that I don't need to eat protein 3 times a day. And I'd rather
Mm,
eat protein, let's say if I have a chicken or if I have a steak or if I have an egg. I'd rather know who I'm buying it from, have actually met and talked with the establishment. I mean, there's a relationship now. It's
mm,
more of an understanding. I've taken responsibility for myself. I've engaged in a relationship. I mean, it's very, I don't know, it's very wholesome. And it's not just, it's Saturday, time to go to Stop and Shop. Let's pack, let's all go there. Let's come back with, 15 bags of food and throw it in the refrigerator. And having spent $400, say, okay, that's it for the week. I'll see you later. I mean, it's very expensive. There's no relationship. You're reading labels. There's no responsibility. It's empty. And you don't
yeah.
know what you're getting. You don't have a clue what you're getting.
Well, one of the things I think is very important is to reduce the level of intimidation that most people have in asking questions when they're speaking to their local farmer, or if they go to on a farm tour or something like that. Because, we don't have a lot of, most of us, the vast, vast majority of people, at least on Long Island, and I would, New York City as well, probably Brooklyn, we don't have a lot of experience with agriculture. And so one of the things that I see when people come to our farm, they're hesitant to ask questions because they don't want to ask a silly question, right? And so you never know where someone is mentally from an educational perspective on, do they know what they're seeing, and do they know when to ask a question about, well, why is there a bag of nitrogen here? What do you use? What do you use that for? Or why don't I see any compost piles? Or how do you get fresh water out to the cattle when they're all the way into back? And where is that fresh water coming from? Like, what? Because they're really sensitive to fresh water. Um, why is it that you move your livestock daily? Like, why is it that you seem to keep them in a pretty small area, but you're moving them constantly? Like, why is this? And one of the things that you just mentioned is, and I think this is really important, I believe, and I can't, I'm sure maybe somebody out there can actually give some sort of citation in terms of research, reports that provide this, but I believe somewhere in all of us, we're all interested in reconnecting with what we're eating and where it comes from. Why? Because it's in our best interest to do it, if you think about it, right? Mentally, there must be something that gets triggered that says, I've eaten this peach and I've never tasted a peach like this, or I've eaten this potato, or I've eaten this, sirloin steak, and I've never tasted this before. And it clicks something. Why does it click something? It clicks something because nature typically provides this dynamic where better tasting food signals a higher level of nutrient density. It's a signal that's sent to our brain that says, this is what you want more of.
Mm.
And the reason why is because it's healthier. Now, where we get twisted up, and so that wanting more of that, and then proceeding in your life to figure out how to get more of that, our survival and whether or not we're going to thrive or not is dependent on that, right? So I believe it's in all of us to want to re-engage. It's harder to do if you're living on the 23rd floor, on 54th Street and 3rd Avenue in Manhattan,
Hmm.
right? It's a little easier if you live in rural Pennsylvania because you're bumping up against it. So, but once it clicks in, it really does click in, and it becomes a passion of, I would say the majority of our customers are very, very passionate about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they're making that association between what I'm eating and the health profile of my body, the health profile of my mind, and then it's happening again and again and again. And where we get twisted, where we get really thrown off track is two things: sugar
I was thinking it's with Twinkies, and you said it. Go ahead.
and marketing.
Right. Exactly.
If you put um it's almost always gonna taste good, to eat more ice cream, right? At some point, you can eat so much of it, you're gonna start feeling bad, right? Um, there's no cooler advertisements out there than, like, when I was growing up, Coca-Cola, right? It was like you could see yourself on a hot day, like sweating, and then you could see that glass with ice in it, and that the beads of condensation running down it, and the Coke being poured in, and be like,
I,
I've got to have that
I've got to have that.
because it's sugar and it's marketing, and it works. But the more you learn about Coca-Cola as you grew older, right? If your parents let you have it occasionally at a birthday party or whatever, but the more you learned about the company, you thought, oh my goodness, this, like, it almost doesn't get worse than this in terms of health. So sugar and marketing throws us off. But when you're reconnecting with what you're eating and where it comes from, the right things begin to happen in your body, and the signals that are being sent from stomach to brain are seeking out more and more nutrient dense foods.
Mm-hmm.
And the farmers that are farming in a way that produces more nutrient dense foods, I think, should be rewarded more. And that's a style of farming, right? That, you know, it conventional may be on one end of the spectrum, and regenerative may be on the other end, and organic may be somewhere in the middle. But for me, from my perspective, the more you engage, the more you'll know where that farmer is on the spectrum. And arguably, the more you should be willing to pay if you value that nutrient density on that spectrum for that product, because it's worth more to your body.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
No, I mean, for me, it makes total sense because that was one of my journeys, where I realized that I was sugar addicted. And I was sugar addicted, where if I opened a sleeve of cookies, I had to eat the entire sleeve.
Yeah.
And then I realized this is disgusting. The first one tastes good. The last one, it's gluttony, and I feel like a pig, and I don't feel good anymore. Oh, I won't eat dinner. Okay, this is not a good thing. This is not good to do. Same thing, with potato chips. It's all of the foods that they market as glorious, wonderful, fabulous, exciting, sexy, ridiculous, fun. I mean, all of these different things, cereals, everything. And I realized, I was like, I've got to start making everything myself, which people think I'm insane about, but I don't really care. If I spend a little bit more time in my kitchen, that's a good thing. I feel I feel connected. I feel connected with the food that I'm eating, where it came from. I am very grateful. It's not like I have to make an intentional moment of grateful. I'm in the kitchen preparing something, and I'm going through all the motions of being grateful. When I eat it, I am thinking to myself, I could have done better. This is the most incredible thing in the world, or I don't like it. I'll never make that again. Um, but it's I don't know how to explain it. I cannot see myself going to McDonald's and getting fast food. I cannot even see that. The food itself, I can't even taking a bite. I can't even see myself doing it, and I haven't. I don't know how many years, but it's a lifestyle change. It is a responsibility. If you've got kids in the family, now you've got to feed them. And the problem, and as you said, it is convenience. The problem is when you have two kids and you and your husband are working and you're trying to make ends meet, it's easy to just shove food down your throat by saying, let's get pizza, let's get McDonald's, let's get Chick-fil-A, let's all go out to a fast food place. So it's easy to do that, but you're paying for it in the long run. So
Well, let's talk about this for a second, because where does the food that McDonald's sell come from?
God only knows.
Well, I mean, it comes from a farm.
At some point.
Yeah, no, it comes from a farm. Okay, so let's just say, so McDonald's is not the issue, right? Because you listed some of them, and their marketing is great, and there's certainly a lot of sugar on that menu, and you can't really blame, right, McDonald's. They're a profit-seeking enterprise, and they do a really good job. And if you travel around the world, believe it or not, that's McDonald's is one of the things that Americans are known for, right? The success of McDonald's. And all that food that McDonald's sells comes from a farm. I'm going to be controversial here, right? It just does.
Mm-hmm.
So
But how do we
I have
make
a
that
farm.
better?
Okay, so now this is the point, right? Which is, let's say we don't grow any vegetables. So admittedly, I know nothing about growing carrots, but I'll use it because it's a little bit more straightforward than me doing this with beef or chicken, but it's exactly the same. And I'll try to do that at the end, just so that the connection can be made. But if, let's say you had a carrot seed and you went to a farm and you planted the carrot seed in their soil, in their field, right? And that's all you did. You put a little water on it. And what would you expect? What would you expect to grow? You'd expect to grow a carrot. I'm not trying to trick anybody, right? Literally, I put a seed in the soil on a farm, a conventional farm in the middle of America. I put water on it. I would expect to get a carrot. What if you didn't get a carrot? What if you got something like just stubbly something and you didn't get much, if anything, of a carrot? What would you think at that point? You would think, well, I just got unlucky, or I'm a bad farmer, or something. Or you could think, well, wait a second, what actually is growing that carrot? That seed is being, it needs to grow, and I'm not going to get into science because that's just not worth it. So the seed needs to grow, and it didn't grow. So what happened? So something didn't happen that should have happened. So then you take a similar seed and you put it onto our farm, and you dig a little hole, you pop it in, you put some water on it, do the same thing, and you grow a beautiful, unbelievable, tasty, just bursting with flavor carrot. Did the same exact thing. This is the difference between conventional farming and regenerative farming. What is growing our food? What is creating health for our bodies and our environment? And I went right to the source in my example, which is, in my opinion, it's the health or not of your soil. Now let's go back to my example. You're back at that conventional farm. That little carrot didn't grow. You said, I'm going to do it a second time because I must have gotten something wrong. And you put the seed in, you cover it with soil, and then you put down a spoonful of nitrogen, a spoonful, and we're talking about synthetic fertilizer here. A bag of, you scooped out a little spoonful of nitrogen, you put a little phosphorus, a little potassium, maybe a little bit of magnesium. You just sprinkled it on the top, maybe put some water in again, and then you had a big carrot. Now the carrot grew, but it didn't taste as good as the one over at Acabonic Farms. But it was a brilliant carrot, and I'd be happy to feed my family that. Now, what grew that carrot? It was synthetic fertilizers. Okay, fine. But I got a carrot, and that's all fine. And that carrot probably went to McDonald's, right? What grew that carrot, and what is the nutrient density, the collection of vitamins and minerals in that carrot versus the carrot that was grown, say, on Acabonic Farms, I'm biased. That's my farm. And I don't grow carrots. I admitted that. But it didn't require any synthetic fertilizers. Well, how could that be? And it not only grew beautifully, but the taste was like something extraordinary. And I haven't tasted it. Like my grandmother says she recognizes it, but nobody else in my family does, type of thing. And then you say, okay, well, what is creating this? What allowed that to happen? And which carrot am I going to be willing to pay a premium for, and why? That's the difference between functional, productive soil, right? And so if we're farming in a way that's destroying the value of the soil, that ultimately is providing the value into the food that we eat, or the food that the cow or the chicken or the pig eats, it's something very, very, very different than a conventional carrot, perhaps, that's going to McDonald's, right? So I've tried to simplify, right? Really simplify and focus. And it's not about McDonald's, right? Because the vast, vast, vast majority of vegetables, fruits and vegetables, and animal proteins that are grown in the United States is grown in that soil that won't grow anything unless you're putting synthetic nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, maybe some selenium, etc. into it. So what is actually feeding us? And by the way, I could have just described in that a organic farm,
Yeah, no. It's like the
because
term
because I'm buying
natural. It's like the term
because I'm no because I'm buying organic chemicals to do
right.
it, right? So okay, but that's okay, right? So that's so again, to me, it's easy to say, oh, it's Burger King, McDonald's, or whatever. But really, let's look at ourselves in terms of what have we decided to do with our money when we go to the supermarket, right? Oh, I'm going to the supermarket and that's better than McDonald's. Well, I'm not sure. I honestly, I don't, that's unclear to me, right? I'm going to a farm that doesn't use any synthetic fertilizers, right? Either organic, right, or conventional. No synthetic fertilizers, no herbicides or pesticides. It doesn't matter if they're called organic herbicides or pesticides or conventional. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need. And why? Because that farm doesn't need any of those things. It's not because they've signed up to be certified organic and these are the protocols that organic or this certification requires. It's because there is a way to farm that so the things that you do every day actually promote the health in the soil such that you don't need to buy these inputs. That your carrots or your beef or your chicken or whatever, or broccoli grows in a way that's ultra tasty, ultra nutrient dense, and doesn't require any of these inputs.
That's when science works.
That's when Mother Nature.
Yeah.
That's Mother Nature. That's all been figured out well before we're around.
Mhm.
And so if you figure out a way, and what we do at Acabonic Farms, and we do this, like if you looked at a pie chart of my day in terms of where, like what I'm thinking about, there'd be like a 10% little piece of that pie that would be cattle, lamb, pork, and chicken. And there'd be a 90% piece that talks that is about how do I farm in a way that's consistent with the way that Mother Nature works, so that I'm not fighting against it, but working in parallel with it, which reduces cost, which increases nutrient density, which reduces any need for antibiotics or growth hormones or herbicides or pesticides or synthetic fertilizers, and say that's the farm that works for me. And if I can't afford it, these are the sacrifices that I'm willing to make in the other areas of my life in order to, because it's important. That's the customer, right?
Right.
That's a very, very small part of the customer, but it doesn't need to be. Like if you looked at an analysis of where all the customers of Acabonic Farms live, it is not in the towns on Long Island
Mhm.
that you associate with being the ultra wealthy towns. It is not. It is more I'm going to say this and I'm probably going to, I can say this because I grew up there. Think about like Smithtown and St. James,
Hmm.
right? That's like,
Regular,
solid middle class.
yeah,
That's
regular.
like you're doing that's a really important town for us. It doesn't, it, you know, it's not a Port Washington,
Right. It's not
right?
Gold
Or
Coast.
Glencoe.
It's not.
Yeah, no. We do have customers there,
Right.
but it's Northport, it's Comac, it's Smithtown,
Right.
it's Huntington,
It's
and
regular people. It's just
it
everyday
is.
regular people.
And it's those customers that said, okay, I get it now. I begin to understand now where health is coming from. It's not coming from me deciding to buy a Tesla instead of a Toyota, right? It's coming by supporting farms, and they may be farms that are up against vineyards or golf courses, whatever it is. It may not be totally perfect, and we're not totally perfect by any stretch, but it's farms that are beginning to regenerate the health of the soil and grow my food in a manner that's entirely unassisted by inputs, right? So that I get the benefit of what Mother Nature provides, which is the perfect level of health in the foods that I eat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense to me, and I'm going to write you a check any minute now. I, you sold me. I just, the thing is, I really do see this, and maybe it's just me, but I really do see this as a natural trend, and it's going to change. Well, as we saw again, COVID shut down so many businesses that the malls, that's it. Malls are done. Big malls, done. Nobody's going back to the big mall. No reason to do
Yeah.
that. So now we've got, we paved all the roads along Long Island, all across the United States. We paved them. We put up these big shopping malls, and we sold everybody the idea that this is good. This is what you want. This is what you need to aspire to become. You want to aspire to live in a place where you can get in a car and drive right to the mall and get anything that you want. That went to hell in a handbasket.
Mm.
And now we're saying, well, I can get anything I want at Amazon. That doesn't necessarily mean it's all great, but anything I want, I can get at Amazon. So that thought process is already there. And
Yeah.
now it's like,
The one,
but I want quality. There are certain
yeah,
things where I just don't, it's where's it coming from? China? I'm basically buying from China when I buy from Amazon. But where do I want meat to come from? And people during COVID found foods because Grubhub and stuff like that began the concept of I can get any food I want through Grubhub. They'll just deliver. But I don't want any food. The next step is already happening. I don't want any food. I mean, I can get any food and it's convenient. Now I think I want to have good food. And that thought
yeah,
process it's slow because not everybody gets it. They're just willing to get their food from the market, local market. But I think it's becoming more of a thought process of where does the food come from? And can I be more responsible to my environment?
yeah. Where does the food? Where does health in my life derive from? Right. Presumably, some there. It's not all food, right? But food should be, I think, a big part of it. Exercise.
Mhm.
There's also now mental health that factors into that. So relationships and things like that. And then you say, okay, well, if that was all the case, maybe it's not coming from a pill, and maybe I should really be thinking about, why are we struggling? Why are our children struggling with certain, issues, whether it's obesity or attention deficit disorder, or this or that, or why is heart disease where it is today, or why are instances of cancer so high, and things like that. And you say, okay, well, maybe health doesn't come from a pill. It comes from things like um, healthier foods that are grown from soil without any synthetic fertilizers and things like that. Maybe it comes from healthier air and healthier water, which comes from, by the way, more local farms that farm regeneratively, because that helps significantly with water quality and runoff and things like that.
Mhm.
And then you start thinking about, well, air quality. Well, yeah, I mean, that actually factors in too, right? Because if there are more green spaces and more healthier farms, and CO2 is being sequestered by soil, and that's a really effective way to do it, and blah, blah, okay. So then you say, okay, well, where do I want to live? I want to live in an area where small local farms are a big part of the community and they're flourishing, right? The farmers are doing really well. They're making enough money to invest further into their operations and their people and to grow. And that's what I want to do. And it's that activity, as opposed to maybe I'm going to buy a Tesla instead of a Lexus because I care about the environment. Wrong, because at least in the United States, where do you think all the electricity that is recharging the battery is coming from, right? Okay, if we're talking about in certain areas of Europe, maybe that's a little bit different, but in the U.S., it's coming from
Gas powered.
natural gas, is from coal, yeah. So that's where it's coming from. So if you put it makes no difference, and I don't care what super really smart, really wealthy people say in this world. That's not the answer. What is the answer, however, and I feel very strongly about this, probably can hear my voice, is simply soil quality. Simply soil quality. It is what will drive environmental health. It is what will drive better human health. It is what will drive ultimately better human mental health. It'll, and if you can go back and study history, the reason why societies fail is because they've strip mined their soil, then they go away,
Mhm.
right? It happens over and over. And this is really, from my perspective, a very important solution to some of the biggest problems that we're facing today.
I could see that. We're talking about the first level Mother Nature of the soil, because the soil is holding it all together. So it's environmentally holding it all together. Mudslides, the rest. So we just fall apart the seams, considering what the soil quality is and what's growing in the soil naturally. And then
Mhm.
along those lines, we've got the native plants versus let's bring in, whatever from whatever country, because, kudzu goes really well and it will take, and now we've got, you know, all of these invasive species that are not natural to the soil,
Mhm.
because our soil is what it is.
Mhm.
you know no, we are in Thailand, we are who we are. In Thailand
Mhm.
kudzu grows, okay, good, it's great there, but it's
Right.
not great here.
Mhm.
So I mean, there are so many levels, there really is. It's deep, it gets very deep. And when you start, I'm not talking about tree hugging, but when you start to think about the fact that we are creatures, we have intelligence. However, we are um, we have a relationship, and if those common threads are broken, it may become irreversible at some point in time. And if we continue to break those common threads, those required relationships, those symbiotic relationships, if we continue to do that, we put ourselves in a situation where you can't solve it. It's now you've got to get up and move. Like you said, you strip mine the soil, now it won't grow anything. It's
And
it's
that's what and
sand
that's what you
turning
see.
into a beach.
And that's what you'll see. There are some properties that we look at to take over, to start grazing, and if you did nothing, you actually wouldn't even be able to grow a weed,
Mm.
because there's no life left in the soil. And so you can repair that, but the amount of time that it would take to repair it. So your first question was, why did you go into livestock farming? Because in fact, when you bring livestock back onto land, it's the fastest way, the most effective natural way to rehabilitate the value of the soil. So the manure and the urine and the grazing and the hoof action and the saliva on the soil, and then the rest periods that we employ as part of our operation, that is what gets those natural systems working again in the soil. So that interaction between soil, forage, animal, right? And those rotations that we do are if you will, nature's medicine in rehabilitating that value in the soil that hopefully will be growing our foods. That's not something that you do overnight. If we wanted to make more money and grow faster, we could just buy bags of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, selenium, magnesium. We could do that. It's a more fragile system. It's a more expensive system. It's a system that creates nutrient deserts in terms of food that we consume. The quickest, most effective, and the healthiest way to do it is actually do what was done on small family farms back prior to World War II, which is they all had livestock. They did run cash crops. They did have, fruits, and they rotated and they rested and they used the fertility from the animals in order to replenish the value that was being sucked out by the carrots that they were harvesting, etc. And they understood that. Like, that was clear. As Americans, we understood it. We didn't need to go to New Zealand or Ireland or South Africa to figure it out. We knew it already. We lost it. Now, Acabonic Farms at least is doing what it can to bring some of that back.
Mm-hmm. I think that it's corny. That is the American dream. I'm sorry, that is the American dream. I don't think the American dream is corporate business. I think the American dream is having. I'm going to be really simple. I'm going to go back to 1777. Having a skill, having the freedom to use that skill and produce and profit by that skill through service, and not having to pay taxes, ridiculous taxes, as an end result back, to the system. And that's still the dream. That's still the dream. I think it's the ultimate dream. It's not just the American dream. I think it's natural for farmers to think this way. Once we come off the farm, get a little lost. It's sort of like, who am I? What do I do? It's pretty simple. You wake up in the morning, you don't have these questions. Who am I? What is my identity? You're like, I'm busy. I got something to do. And that work is it's satisfaction. It's pretty simple.
Yeah,
On
it
a
is.
small scale or a big scale, it's pretty simple.
It's a rewarding job. One of the things that I'd like to see more of is one of the things I'd like to see less of is subsidy. So could you imagine working,
Yeah.
and whatever your job is, so it could be you're a lawyer or you're a doctor or you're an advertising specialist, and you work your tail off every day, and then at the end of the day, you know that you just lost money. And the only reason why you're going to be able to make a little bit of money this year is because the government is subsidizing you heavily. Now, just put yourself in that position. Now, these are good people across America that are farming, right? Can you think about how that wears on you, right? I can't make a profit unless the government subsidizes me. You know how discouraging that is, how defeating that is. Every day you work your tail off. And so, when I see things like, massive amount of subsidies, and I'm a bit bitter about this, but it happens, and I'm a big boy and I get over it, or I get a phone call and I get someone makes some comment on social media that says, what kind of fool would I be to buy a $12 pound of ground beef when I can go to Costco and get it for $3? Do you think like I'm driving a Ferrari or something? We're not making a profit unless the government is bailing us out.
Right.
That's the whole lot of us, by the way. So I'm not. So I guess what I'm asking for is, and I probably could make the same speech about teachers, right? Where these men and women are going to work every day. I mean, and they are just crushing themselves to put up with all the nonsense, right? They don't have the right supplies, they don't have the right support. Maybe there's security issues. There's all sorts of things. Parents are a nightmare, right? We all know this. We can say because it's true. And then they come home and they're making peanuts to do it. Do you know how discouraging that is? And so if we as a society in the US, but the American sort of psyche needs to be, there are some professions out there, right? We could set farmers aside, but there's some professions, teachers, firemen, policemen, farmers, that these people should be making a much, much better living than what they're making because of what they're doing, right? Do I have sympathy because plastic surgeons are making more money? Well, not as much as you'd think, right? Okay, now I get it. Like there are some aspects of that where like they're reconstructing people that were horribly injured. I get that all, and that. But do we need to pay lawyers more? On a lot of them, probably not. No, we don't. There are a lot of things that we probably don't need to be paying so much for. But when it comes to food, especially very high quality food, education, especially high quality teachers, brave men and women who are running into fires or into really unsafe situations. Yeah, the people should be making more money. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
it is a little screwy. I don't know the answer to that question because, you're going to pay a lawyer a lot of money so that you could get a divorce, so that he could screw your husband out of every penny that he's got, and you get the house, and you get the car, and you get everything that you need, and you're happy. And that's a good lawyer, and he should get his money. And he's essentially cheated two people. Um, and I see these problems. These are problems. It's problems of who we think we want to be when we grow up, because these professions are making money. I don't know when lawyers and doctors suddenly started making lots of money. It wasn't always that way.
I don't know, but you know what? I think that if they're, I shake my head sometimes again because I listen to some of the phone calls that we get, just questions about the business and some of the comments, and I shake my head because of all the people, right? If you want to sling mud at somebody, then sling it at like the CEO of Exxon or, you know, this company that's fracking energy in, Ohio or something like that. Then there's the teachers, then, there's the policemen, and then there's the firemen and maybe the farmers that I'm not sure. I'm not sure you got it right. Like these actually, you could come and work for a week at Acabonic Farms, and I don't think you'd be slinging any kind of mud.
But if you do,
It's
you'd
not.
be slinging it back into the ground.
Yeah, I guess you get my point, which is that there's a price to pay for, for quality.
Hmm.
And if we're interested in that as a country, and if we're interested in our health, and we're interested in, quality of life past the age of 60 and not being reliant on uh, pharma and things like that, then we should be more supportive uh, of regenerative
Yeah.
farming, in my
Hmm.
opinion.
I can't say that in any better way. We need to start shifting our values around a bit, and people are already doing that. That's the trend that I see, that people are questioning the value system and wondering, um, why am I spending so much money here, there, and what am I doing? And how should I do that better? And I want to be a little bit more responsible. It's Is it a convenient trend? All right, maybe. When I say convenient trend, in other words, those people who have the convenience to do it, they'll do it. But I don't think it's only convenience. I think it's people, like you said, it's hard workers that live in normal America that are not making, ridiculous six-figure salaries. They need to make every penny stretch, and they're realizing that the nutrient dense foods will feed their family better than the Twinkies will. Okay, they're full now because we gave them dessert and gave them Twinkies. They're full, but what are they full of? They're full of sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd rather have given them a small, delicious hamburger than a big, juicy, tasteless piece of meat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
No,
how
I
I
think,
think. That I and I don't think that I'm so unusual. I just think that it's an education. As I said, our values are at some point in time. Remember the time when, that the food pyramid was created, and
mm-hmm.
that food pyramid these days is completely wrong. There's absolutely nothing true about it. It was a marketing. It was probably the first multi-level marketing effort that was ever done. And now it's shifted again, and it's people trying to figure out, okay, if beef's okay, if chicken is okay, if if I shouldn't be eating so much pasta and flour, whatever it is, whatever it is that people are realizing and wanting to take more responsibility for within their own household. Once you start questioning that, that's when a farm like yourself, where I can actually call and ask questions and get answers.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can, and I think you can. The guiding light, if is just sit there. If you could sit there quietly and think about how does Mother Nature work, right? And in the example of a diet, right, the food pyramid, and you say, well, what is really important in nature? Nature is very, very diverse. There's no, as you begin to explore this topic, there's no monoculture. There's no 1,000 acres of corn in nature, right? That doesn't exist. If you come to our farm, for instance, you'll see a large number of different grass species. You'll see a large number of different legume species. You'll see woods. You'll see a number of different classes of livestock. There's diversity. And that's the way that Mother Nature works. And that diversity equals strength. So if you take that and say, okay, well, what is he talking about? We're talking about diet and health. And if you take that back to yourself and say, okay, well, where do I tend to go wrong? I tend to go wrong when there are imbalances. And there are imbalances when there's an absolute, meaning I'm only going to, do this with my diet, as opposed to saying, well, maybe a more diverse, healthier, whole food diet is probably best, because that's sort of the environment that I live in. That's, what works in nature is probably what's going to work for me. And then, is it the worst thing in the world if I have occasionally a dessert, right? If I occasionally have a scoop or two of ice cream? No, actually, not at all. It's not going to do anything to your health. It's going to make you feel better. Probably going to help your mental health, which is going to help your physical health. Okay. So is it the worst thing in the world? Now, this is going to be controversial. Is it the worst thing in the world to have a cow eat grain? No, it's not. It would be the worst thing in the world if all that a cow ate was grain. Now, to just clarify to my customers, we do not feed our cattle grain. We're 100% grass-fed and finished. My point is, if we did feed them a little bit of grain, it probably would make them happier. Don't tell anybody.
Every once in a while, it's like having that ice cream.
It's sugar. It's energy, right? And so if we planted seedless corn in our field right into our grass, and that sort of matured, and we let the cattle out, do you know what they would go for first?
The grass.
They would go
They would go for
they would go for the seed, of course, because if you brought your children into a store and on the left-hand side there were fruits and veggies, and on the right-hand side there were, there was candy and Slurpees. What would they go for
Right.
first? Right.
Unfortunately.
Now, if all they ate was the candy and the Slurpees, then we'd have a problem. But if you let them have, you know, a little bit of ice cream, or at a birthday party, a little a glass of Coca-Cola or something like that, is it going to ruin the child? No, it's not. It's probably going to make them probably a little bit happy, and by the way, a little bit more like, with it. And then so it's not the worst thing in the world, right? And my point is
Right,
moderation,
moderate.
and it's balance, right? And that really is where I see when I get the phone calls or I get the comments, it tends to be people that have lost focus of balance. And when you see it out of balance, you could see this very, very clearly on farms. When you see things out of balance, you'll start seeing bags of herbicides and pesticides,
Mm.
because all of a sudden then you'll have an explosion in pests because it's out of balance, or an explosion of weeds because it's out of balance, right? But on our farm, we don't use any herbicides or pesticides. Do we have some weeds? Yeah, we have a little bit of weeds, but hardly at a point where it's an issue. Do we have some pests? Yeah, we have some pests, but do I ever notice them? No, because there's so few, because we have
And the
balance.
birds are very happy.
And the birds are happy. And so, exactly. And so if there is balance, and you can see this, and it's something like everything I ever learned, I learned from you're just observing at the farm. When you do have that balance, things are much, much, much healthier, right? And and it's much calmer. And when you get the stress out of the system, in addition to that balance, right, you're being respectful of the animals. You're being quiet and thoughtful in your approach to things. That stress leaves, the diversity and balance exists, and health skyrockets. And and we could learn a lot from that, right, in our everyday life, right? Work to get the stress out. Balance your diet. Balance your activities in during the day, your work-life balance. You're going out too much. You may be drinking a little bit, whatever it is. But when you return to balance and you return to peace and you begin to be respectful and you begin to be thankful and begin to enjoy people and relationships more, your health gets better.
Right.
Well, I see that on the farm. That's what I learned from the farm.
It's not an effort to become intentional when everything is in balance. You don't even think about it. It just happens. It just falls into place. It starts to fall into place when you it's not a miracle process. I mean, it's a natural process for everyone, but we have forgotten that speed, because we're moving at exponential speeds. So we've got to do for a number of reasons. I mean, we've bought this marketing dream. We've bought the marketing dream, and we're living it. It's not natural, and then we have to say to ourselves, I need to be more mindful and more intentional. You can do that if you slow down. But if you've got to be in 5 different places at once, you can't think straight. And if you're not eating properly, you're getting even more frustrated. So it's just like this negative cycle that just takes off. And at some point in time, you end up in the hospital.
Yeah.
And you don't know, when did this happen? How did this happen? I try to, I say no a lot. I just say no a lot. And I try to do, I don't know what it is, the right things. I experiment. I try to do the things that make sense to me. And that doesn't always work out the first time, but I keep trying. And I think that it's a responsibility. I think everybody needs to be that responsible, and they need to realize that food is their responsibility. It's not just something you buy and you nourish yourself with. It is a relationship You're helping your body, but you're also making sure that the food that you're eating isn't raping the earth, because you need the food next year. Where's it going to come from? If it's totally
Yeah.
debilitated the environment, if it's
Yeah.
throwing if it requires pesticides, if it's leaking into the water system, if it's doing all these odd things, that is our responsibility. It's not the farmer's fault. It's not the government's fault. It's everybody's responsibility. And if we take it back,
Yeah. And yeah, I'm really happy that you said that. I think it's really important. We have us as consumers have the ultimate power. So we're not powerless. We have all of the power, right? These big companies or these lobbying firms or the US government or any government for that matter, when we appreciate that we have the power to make change and to affect whether or not those big companies stay in business or go out of business, or countries or governments change their policies toward X, Y, and Z, then we realize, okay, now I'm going to be much more thoughtful before I spend this, you know, $65 at Stop and Shop. I'm going to now make the decision with the way I spend my
right.
money, right? What kind of community do I want to live in? Do I want to have farms? What kind of educational system do I want to send my children through? What kind of relationship do I want to have with the local police? Whatever it may be, we have the ability to do it. Um, and that's why I always say it's not Amazon, it's not McDonald's. We can change what we do tonight. I mean, right after this call, we can make it. We can actually just start to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's very empowering, I
It
think.
is. It is. I want to underline that with an exclamation point at both ends. We do have the power to take it back.
How is it that we spent an hour and a half on this call talking to a beef farmer and didn't even talk about ribeyes or strip steaks or filet mignon? Could you imagine that? That's really, because it's not about that
No.
actually.
Well,
Um,
those are delicious cuts of beef, but it's again, it's not the marketing value of the food where they make, ribeye, ooh ah, ooh ah. It's what does that food mean? And how, there's a relationship. There is a relationship. No man is an island, and that's not only social, but that's also how we interact with everything around us. And I don't mean, again, to sound like a tree hugger or some sort of, nature fanatic. It makes total sense. It
mhm,
just makes sense.
mhm,
Um, and it's the way you run your business. You don't run your business into the ground. You don't run the soil into the ground. Even though you can replace it with, you say, oh well, I can run into the ground and then I can put in these, these great fertilizers that somebody sold me. That's what I'm saying. Don't get sold. Don't get
mhm,
sold. Think
mhm.
about
It's a long game, and when you're younger, sometimes you get distracted by these sort of get rich or get healthy quick
it.
schemes and
Yes.
things like that. But you learn as you get older. It's actually just a little bit of work every
Mhm.
day in the right direction and patience. And then ultimately you'll see that you have what you want, whether it's health or whether it's finances or whether it's relationships, whether it's whatever it is. It's a little bit of work every day. It's a long game.
Mhm.
And there's no shortcuts in agriculture. I don't think there's any shortcuts in
There's no
nature.
shortcut
It's
in life.
probably
There's no shortcut in life.
there's no
And you don't
and
want a
and I
shortcut anyway.
and I suspect there's no shortcuts from a health perspective either. This is why I get a little bit nervous, although I'm open-minded to it with some of these weight loss drugs. Like we've seen it before where you get instant quick results without any hard work. And where has that ever gotten anybody, right? So I don't need to be a scientist. I don't need to be an executive at a big pharma company. I don't need to, all I know is the basic, which is typically if something's a little bit too good to be true, and we all know this because we're Long Islanders, right? We know, like my mother says, oh, she uses, that's fugazi. Well, growing up, I never knew what that meant. And at some point I learned that's fake. That's not true. That's BS, right? That's the Italian way. Oh, that's, you know, and sometimes you just say, okay, well, that's fugazi. The way we're going to get there is a little bit in the right direction every day. And then before you know it, we'll be where we need to be.
Absolutely.
That's also empowering, I think.
Absolutely. And that's, as I said, you can't get more intentional than that. That is the intention. The intention is to do right every day. Oh, I'm thinking about this and I want to make it work. Well, if that is your philosophy, then suddenly everything really does change. It's not about meeting somebody on the street and being extra kind to them, and that's not a mindset of intention with being grateful. The grateful part comes in when you realize I did the right thing. This person is better. That person is better. I'm better. And it was done in an instant second. And I didn't even need any intentional meditation to get there. It just happened because that is how it works. The American dream was never get rich fast. Suddenly somebody said that. I don't know when it happened. That was not the American dream.
Yeah.
And the American dream is deeper than that. It's much deeper than that. It has a lot to do with freedoms, but those freedoms, again, it's not that I'm free to say what I want and free to do what I want. It's much deeper than that because freedom comes with a cost. And so
Yeah.
if I'm free to feed myself and make a better choice, and if you're free to run a farm and make a better choice, and if my children are free to pick a career with longevity, with that feels good to them, that does the right thing for them, that provides a service. I mean, all of these things, that's the American dream. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm ridiculously patriotic, but I think if we sat down and we had a conversation with the founding fathers, I think their concept of the American dream would astound us.
It'd be a shock to, I think, a good chunk of us, huh?
Yeah, because I don't think any of them would sit down and say, oh, it's all about making money. Now, I don't know how much money Ben Franklin had. I don't know how much money, George Washington had, Thomas Jefferson. I don't know how much money they had. I really don't. And that's not the issue. But I can honestly say that there was a philosophy there that we have lost. And the philosophy, and I look at that philosophy as it's a responsibility ethic. It really is. I'm responsible for far more than I am free of. It's almost as if freedom is responsibility. And the more responsibility I take, the freer that I am, because I've made the right decisions. I'm free to make these decisions, to be responsible for these important things in my life and in others' lives. It's an odd thing. And what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I always think about my grandparents when we talk about stuff like this, and my grandparents came to the country after the Second World War, and I don't, my sense is their definition of the American dream would be a system that allows you to work ultra, ultra hard. And that's not dissimilar to China or Russia or Poland or the US, right? You work really, really hard. And then this is the part that I think is different, which is, and it's not a guarantee, right? It's not a guarantee that if you work really, really hard, you'd get ahead, but you'd have the opportunity to. if you combine that ultra hard work with responsibility and discipline, savings, being respectful, building a community that are going to look out for you and protect you on the downside and give you, opportunity on the upside, and a long time frame, right, where maybe then you're able to send your children to a really good school, right, and you then would be able to sort of get ahead. That to me was the definition of the American dream, such that my grandparents, when they passed away, it wasn't necessarily because of none of them had a very significant salary over the course of their lives, but they worked 2 or 3 jobs. They spent virtually nothing. They saved everything. They invested everything in their family, and they passed away fairly wealthy.
Mhm.
It wasn't because of what they made, it was because of the life that they lived and how much they saved. And so to me, that has always been what the American dream is. It's not about, I'm working hard, so I'm entitled to get rich. I'm sorry, I don't think that's the American dream. I'm working hard, so I'm entitled to be in the upper class. I mean, I don't think that's either, right? The given is you have to work hard. The given is you have to work really smart. And then you need to make the right decisions once you're doing it. And if you do all that, I think there is a platform in America where that you still can be better off. That to me is the American dream, and that may sound not entirely exciting to a lot of people, but it's very exciting if you're coming from communist Poland or from Thailand or wherever it may be. But that's not what the opportunity is
Right.
there.
And I also think you level everyone up. You bring everyone up with you.
Yeah.
Because if it is a community, then the community has more. Because if you have a service and you're working hard, you have a good service that you can share with the community. And they're also doing all of those things. That means that everyone in the community has a higher level of service and products to choose from.
Yeah. And the community does need to stick together. And I think that what's kind of great about, for all of its challenges, Long Island, what's really great about it is that we have access to a lot of great things, and increasingly so, right? And really nice communities. I grew up in Seaford. We moved out to Smithtown, St. James, and then I moved further east after that. And in each of those places, really great neighbors, really great friends, really great schools. And I believe strongly that community still exists for us here. We're lucky in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Well, from your mouth to God's ears. I have to have hope and faith, and I see that in small businesses like yours, when people think out of the box and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to solve this problem, and I'm going to do it in a responsible way, and it's
with the support of the
community. And over the long haul, and that's the point. I'm not trying to make a buck now so I could sell it. You're not looking to flip the farm, right? That's not the purpose. The purpose is to create this possibly for your children, possibly whatever. The point is that it's the long haul. It's the long haul.
Yeah, and I'm really happy with that, and that works for me. So
yeah. Do you have any last fabulous thoughts, tips, tricks, incentives, sales? No, for the listeners.
Well, I'd just say that. I'd just say thank you. We've been doing better every year, and that's because we enjoy the support of Long Island, New York, Brooklyn, increasingly so Connecticut and Jersey, and so thank you for that. We are running a sale right now. It'll end on today is the 17th of May, which is Friday. a week before, if you will, the Memorial Day. So we run a sale on burgers and hot dogs, which is what's going on now. And then just check occasionally. We do run from time to time, but and then last thing I would say is if you sign up to our newsletter, which you could do on the website, you'll get the dates for our farm tours. And we'd love to see you at one of those farm tours and continue the discussion and to continue to learn from each
I
other.
think I got a newsletter today.
Oh,
I
you
think
did?
so. I think I did.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll try not to overload your inbox and provide some value to you.
I can't imagine that you wouldn't. That's just your
Thank
way.
you.
It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I thank you
Likewise.
for your farm and your product and your time.
My pleasure, Dre. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And that's a wrap.